Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how the consumer market and consumer marketplace, indeed the very nature of consumers and the structure of consumers, is changing all across the Western world. It's under assault from the consumer market as we know it is changing rapidly. It's under assault from on one side, the amount of brown and black people being brought into the West, and the absolute importance that the globalists place on mass migration. That they won't let anything stop it, nothing, and they will do anything and everything, destroy whatever they have to keep the mass migration going. It's an article of unquestioned faith now that in the eyes of the globalists, it's something as natural as gravity or that water is wet. Mass migration has to continue and has to go on. So the once near homogeneous consumer markets of the past all across the West, which contains the most advanced consumer brands, whether it be in goods or services. Crossing national boundaries. I mean, you could say that a couple, some of the businesses in China, say, are bigger, but it's only because they're monopoly businesses in China with a population of 1.4 billion. But in terms of commercial products going around the world, then it's the white Western countries that pretty much own all the brands, the Japanese accepted, I guess. But having a look at the changes in the demographics, the market demographics. So we've got white people in Australia as a case in point. 26 years ago, the white population in Australia was almost 98%. Today it's less than 60%, and with another 10 years it'll be less than 50%. So that gives you an idea as to how quickly things are changing. And this is the case all across the Western world, that the proportion of the total population or whites make up a dwindling proportion of the total population. Now that's on one side. On the other side is to change these notions of equity, which are very ideological, and equity in terms of equal outcomes. So in the victim totem pole of activism, then gay, sort of the black lesbian, the transgender black lesbian, all this sort of stuff, they're developing or have developed a victim hierarchy here, where until the most disadvantaged victim or victim group, and they attempt to expand the victim group as much as they can, until that victim group is supposedly in every imaginable concept of status, social status, equal with everyone else or equal with the most advantaged white people, then until we reach that, then society is in a state of rabid dysfunction. So the idea of say using Dylan Mulvaney, the transgender guy, to promote any sort of product. I mean, and the one I'm thinking of at the moment is the Bud Light beer brand, but using Dylan Mulvaney to promote that is this idea of the whole social structure and racial structure of the consumer market is changing. And we, as an owner of Bud Light or whatever the brand might be, we have to find new ways of reaching our consumer base if we want to keep our product and our services and so on relevant to the consumer mass. If we've still got a marketing structure that's pitching at straight white males, for example, then we're looking at a dwindling market, a declining market. So we have to change. So given that we need to now pitch to a different and wider marketplace of consumers, what do we do? How do we go about it? So this is the challenge that's facing a lot of these, in fact, all of them, not just a lot, but all of them. Now, you may find there's a local business, small business that just sells into their village or their town. That's different. But I'm talking, major national or indeed multinational brands, and they again are selling to a different marketplace. Now, it's not. You can say, well, an international brand, say in the case of pharmaceuticals. Everyone still is going to need, a particular drug, regardless of what race of people or whether they're gay or not, or something. That the drugs have a common application regardless of who the person is. Now, you may say, well, certain drugs that might be for people who have AIDS or something, and they're a particular group. But outside of that, so many pharmaceuticals, whether it's aspirin or anything else, has mostly, at least, a universal application. But we're talking about discretional consumer brands here with Bud Light, or any consumer goods in that category. You've got a choice whether or not you want to buy it, or you feel like it today, or you don't have to have it, and it's not going to be prescribed to you by, for example, a doctor or some other professional. So the reality is, given it's completely a consumer choice, and I don't think consumer choice is really going to last much longer. I think the globalists are going to want to institute and implement monopolies on everything. And I think over the next 50 years, less than that, I imagine, that we'll see that the idea of consumer choice, I think, will be taken away from us. So nonetheless, currently today, guys like the Bud Light or other discretional other consumer brands that are bought on discretion and impulse and so on, they still have to find people who want to buy their product, and so imaging is a big part of that sort of marketing for those sort of discretionary products. Now, just looking at the Bud Light thing, they've hired a very Jewish lady, married into a Jewish family, very Jewish in her manner and her way of talking, well-to-do background, well connected into the big money end of town, the big financial firms. And I wouldn't be surprised if Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch were pretty much told by the BlackRock type style of companies that we want her, you put her in. So I wouldn't be surprised if something like that went on. And I've noticed too, with the amount of these discretionary consumer brands, doesn't matter whether it's Nike or beer or beverages generally, or other discretionary consumer brands. I've noticed how often they're putting in Jewish women as executive vice presidents of marketing and so on. Gillette, I mean, the list goes on. Or their consultants all around them, if they're not Jewish women, are Jewish advisory organisations. I don't know why that's so. I guess from a Jewish perspective, they're looking at it that the days of the Christian Gentile white consumer, the days are passing. Those days are gone. They're disappearing, and disappearing fast, by the way. So who better to bring in than Jewish, whether they're activists subconsciously or overtly, it doesn't really matter. But they've been sort of selected to preside over the demise of the Christian white Gentile society, whether it be from a consumer or a political perspective or legal perspective. It's an interesting sort of thought that, but I've just noticed, I don't comment on it that it's positive or negative or anything, but just noticed how many Jewish females have been wheeled in to preside over the final cutting demise of the white Gentile Christian consumer society. but coming back to regardless of who they wheel in, they've still got that same challenge. The challenge won't go away, regardless of who they bring in to do the marketing. The challenge is still there that in the West, as a proportion of the total amount of consumers, white people, if they aren't already, will be less than 50%, which makes men, white men, a quarter of that, 25% or so of the total population. Now, they may still have, on a per capita, per head basis, a higher consumer purchasing power than the other group, but even, that's narrowing. The amount of wealthy white people is declining. In Australia alone, if you want to live what I would call a solid middle class lifestyle in a big city like Sydney, there's 2% of income earners can afford to live that. There's obviously the older white people who bought their property at a time when the purchasing power of the paycheck was far greater than it is today. But outside of that, but people who can afford a middle class lifestyle funded from their own financial resources is less than 2% of income earners in Australia. And I think it'd be the same, pretty much the same all over most of the Western world in the big international cities such as Sydney or London and New York and so on. So that challenge is still there. How do we market our discretionary consumer product to the changing demographic of consumers? Now, whether or not they're looking, I can tell they're looking for something that has broad potential appeal. So, well, I know instead of selling to straight white males, which we previously, why don't we do a campaign to say how evil straight white males are? Then the other 75% of the population that aren't straight white males will perceive us as being, morally superior because we hate straight white males, which means, we are therefore morally superior. Therefore, our products are morally superior. So everyone, the blacks, the lesbians, the women, the everyone else is going to flock to our brand because we're happy to say the straight white males are evil, wicked Nazi, fascist Hitlers. Very Jewish there. So that doesn't seem to be working so well. But if you talk to any male politician and their advisors, or anyone who's got to pitch a message to the public, a male politician will say the best way to get the women's vote is to say that all men are bad and evil, all women are victims, and I'm a big, hairy-chested he-man of a politician, and I'm going to protect you women from those other bad, evil, Nazi, fascist men. And then women go, oh, he's my big, hairy-chested protector. You're so big and strong. And that'll get them the women's vote. It's very sad we're in a society where the only way to appeal to women or reach them emotionally is to say that all men are evil. I mean, what a terrible state our society must be in if that's the pitch. Or the way to appear morally superior is to say that all straight white men are evil and that transgender people and lesbians and so on, black lesbians are all good and morally superior. I mean, goodness me, how is society degenerated to this stage where that's the big pitch. That's the one that's going to bring home the bacon and sell you lots of product. Now, I don't think it does work. If you look at the Gillette thing where, all men are evil presses and that sort of thing, that didn't work. The Nike stuff and various. I mean, some have been able to get away with it, but they've had to tell terrible lies, push radical feminist propaganda and do all these sorts of ridiculous things where it becomes a relative thing that, look, we must be good because we're saying straight white males are bad, so we must therefore be good by extension. That seems to me to be a rather short-sighted advertising campaign, but it seems that the suggestion or the implication is that they've already given up on straight white males. Either that or they can count on them still buying their product, even though they're treated shabbily, or maybe they think, well, straight white males aren't watching this crap on television anyway. They're too busy, working or, looking at, the news they prefer online or something. So it doesn't matter. We're unlikely to. Very few of them are going to see this advert. So who cares? But coming back to this idea of how do you market to such a disparate group of potential consumers? Do you run adverts pitching at each particular? So the Hispanic lesbians have their advert. The black homosexuals have their advert. The transgenders that are Eskimos have their advert, and so how do you reach that many people The Africans have a different one, and so the Chinese diaspora, the Japanese diaspora. You go on forever. It's very difficult to produce an advert for such small splinter groups that don't form a homogeneous map. Like if you advertise to the Japanese in Japan, that's different. You can make one pass at it and you've got one thing to reach the majority as you'd see it. But in the West now, it's such a fucking patchwork that you can't do that anymore. That option's now not on the table anymore. So what is the common, how can you reach most or all of the people or a decent number of them and get them to appreciate your brand? I mean, how many transgender people are there in the American society? What a tenth of 1%. So using Dylan Mulvaney to advertise your product, who's that going to reach exactly? Are you assuming that all women, straight women, lesbians, blacks, everyone, Latins, everyone's going to look at that and go, wow, those Bud Light folks, they're really moral. They're saying that white men are evil, or that transgenders are good, or they're supporting transgender. Wow, they must be really taking the moral high ground here. I'll buy their product. So I think it's people, and you're just listening to that in my view at least, that VP at Bud Light, that woman, the Hirschenfeld or whatever her face was. She's supposed to have gone to, I think, Wharton School, was it, and comes from a well-to-do family. And whatever she knows about she just listening to what she's saying and talking about, someone's given her a script to read. Let's suppose that that's her own work and her own views. She wouldn't make it past the first 5 minutes of the first interview with me if I was doing the recruiting. I go, wow, you got to be kidding. So I'm assuming it was forced on them, and whichever or whoever group of executives signed off on hiring her, I mean, they should be fired as well. I mean, what a bunch of fucking useless morons. Jesus. Who's going to do the heavy, hard, and it is going to be hard, it won't be easy. Who's going to do this heavy policy lifting in terms of marketing policy and marketing strategy? Who's going to do this heavy lifting? So, well, how do we reach this new consumer market? How do we reach all these different customers and groups and subgroups and transgender blacks and gay, lesbian, Koreans, and how do we reach all these groups? Is there any one group now that's big enough that we can pitch to that and say that's our consumer market? Now that you could say, well, that's still the white population or the white male population, but they've fallen from say in the case of the United States, they've fallen from being 44%, this is white males, approximately 44% of the population, and with the better jobs, are down to 25%, 25% of the population. So it's getting on for half now what it was. And there's a much wider dispersal of these better jobs. So the purchasing power per head of the white population is also declining. So it's a double whammy there. So where is your market now? Where are your consumers? How do you reach them? And that's the big challenge that they're trying to wrestle with at the moment. But they're putting some very low IQ, flunky stooges in to do that heavy lifting, and it's going to take a lot more than that. It's a new ball game. But the interesting thing, or one of the interesting takeaways from my perspective at least, was how many Jewish women have been put in these senior marketing roles, getting paid, by the way, $2, $3, $4, $5, $6 million a year to fuck it all up. Someone would pay me $6 million to fuck things up like that, but to fuck it all up, and this need to push Jewish women into this role. Particularly, and it sort of tickles my fancy a bit here, this idea of the Jewish presiding over the demise of the Christian Gentile consumer world. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.